Okay, so get this. Forget rags to riches. Today we're diving into riches to, well, more riches. We're going to unpack the 10 things Donald Trump did to build his fortune.
Oh, wow.
Based on this fascinating book, we've got excerpts from Get ready for a wild ride through bankruptcies, branding, and some seriously eyebrow-raising deals.
It's a fascinating case study in how wealth is built, or in this case, kind of amplified in modern America.
Right.
And it all starts with understanding how Trump played the game.
Right.
Starting with the myth of the self-made man.
Yeah, Chapter 1, Start Rich, Stay Rich, or Fake It, really digs into that. I mean, most people know Trump came from money, but this chapter really lays out how much of a head start he had.
It dismantles the image of Trump as like this scrappy entrepreneur building from nothing.
Right.
You know, his father, Fred Trump, was already a real estate powerhouse in New York.
Right.
We're talking millions in assets, political connections, you know, a whole network that Donald inherited.
And that network is what helped him land the deal that really put him on the map, the Commodore Hotel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This dilapidated hotel was a real eyesore for New York City, and they were desperate for someone to redevelop it.
Right.
Trump saw an opportunity not just to build a hotel, but to build his image as a deal maker, you know, a savior of the city.
Right, but he needed more than just charm to pull this off, and he needed some serious financial leverage.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where his father's connections and his own audacity came into play.
Okay.
He managed to secure a 40-year tax abatement from the city, meaning he'd pay almost no property taxes for decades.
Wow.
It was a massive financial advantage
Right.
that few developers could have dreamed of getting.
Essentially, he got the city to subsidize his grand plans.
Right.
But even with that, he still needed a hefty loan to actually build the hotel.
He did, and this is where we see his risk-taking, some might call it recklessness, in action.
Yeah.
He convinces Chase Manhattan Bank to loan him a whopping $70 million, while he only put in $10 million of his own money, most of which came from, you guessed it, his father.
So he's already using other people's money to build his empire. It's a high-stakes gamble. But the book suggests he wasn't actually all that worried about the risk.
Right. That's because he understood the power dynamics of debt. He knew that if the project failed, the banks would be more eager to restructure the loan than to, like, take possession of a failing hotel. He was playing a different game than most developers.
And it paid off, at least in the short term. The Commodore was reborn as the Grand Hyatt, a glitzy symbol of Trump's ambition.
Yeah.
And as the book points out, his ability to sell an image.
Right, and that image was everything.
Yeah, the book details how Trump was meticulous in crafting this narrative of himself as a self-made man. You know, he downplayed his father's role, the tax breaks, the loans, and instead focused on, you know, his own deal-making prowess. It's a brilliant marketing strategy, really. He understood that perception was more important than reality, especially in the world of luxury real estate.
And that's where Chapter 2, Branding When the Logo is the Product, comes in.
Okay.
This is where we see Trump shift from being a developer to, like, a brand, selling not just buildings, but the idea of Trump.
Trump Tower was the embodiment of that idea.
Yeah.
Right? That pink marble, the waterfall in the atrium.
Yeah.
It was all about projecting an image of wealth, exclusivity, success.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He understood that in a world obsessed with status and image, a name could be more valuable than bricks and mortar.
Right.
He turned Trump into a symbol of luxury.
Right.
And people were willing to pay a premium for it, even if the actual product didn't always live up to the hype.
And he was relentless in promoting that brand. The book talks about how he would stage events, plant stories in the press, even exaggerate sales figures.
Oh, yeah.
To create this aura of exclusivity and demand.
He was a master of generating buzz.
Right.
Of keeping his name in the headlines.
Right.
And he understood the power of celebrity.
Yeah.
He courted famous tenants for Trump Tower.
Right.
Knowing their presence would further enhance the building's prestige and attract even more buyers.
He was creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, in a way. The more people believed in the Trump brand, the more valuable it became, even if the underlying assets were sometimes shaky.
And that's where his marketing genius really shines through. He was selling an aspirational lifestyle, a fantasy of success that people were eager to buy into.
But his branding strategy wasn't without its downsides. The book delves into the Trump Soho project, which was plagued by lawsuits, construction defects, accusations of fraud.
And yet, even with all that negative publicity, Trump still managed to profit from licensing fees. He had successfully separated his brand from the actual product, shielding himself from liability.
Wow.
While still reaping the reward.
It's a risky strategy, but one that ultimately paid off for him. He understood that in the world of branding, perception often trumps reality.
And that leads us to another key aspect of his wealth-building strategy, reality TV.
Okay.
When his real estate empire faced setbacks in the early 90s, he pivoted to entertainment, starring in The Apprentice.
It's fascinating how he used that show to revitalize his image,
Right.
transforming himself from a struggling developer to a savvy business mogul, firing people left and right.
Right. The show was a brilliant move. It allowed him to reach a whole new audience, rebrand himself for a new generation, and generate a whole new revenue stream.
Right, and it wasn't just the show itself. The book mentions how The Apprentice boosted his brand value. I mean, Forbes estimated his wealth at $2.9 billion in 2015, with a huge chunk of that $3.2 billion attributed to the Trump brand.
Essentially, the idea of Trump was worth more than his actual assets.
Right.
It's a testament to his ability to create and sell an image that would eventually propel him to the highest office in the land.
It's a remarkable story, really, from inheriting a real estate empire to building a global brand. Trump's early career is a masterclass in leveraging connections, manipulating perception, and turning setbacks into opportunities. But there's a lot more to unpack.
Yeah.
And we'll be back after a quick. Okay, so we've seen how Trump built his brand and turned his name into, like, a commodity.
Right.
But this next chapter, Debt the Billionaire's Reset Button, it dives into a tactic that's, well, risky and kind of genius at the same time.
Yeah, it challenges the conventional wisdom about debt, showing how Trump used it not as a burden, but as a tool to restructure deals, gain leverage, and sometimes even walk away from massive financial obligations.
It all centers around the Taj Mahal casino, right?
Yeah.
This was supposed to be his crown jewel, the eighth wonder of the world, but it quickly became like a financial black hole.
Exactly. Trump financed the Taj Mahal with junk bonds, which are essentially high-risk, high-interest loans that traditional banks wouldn't touch.
Oh, wow.
He was betting big that the casino's profits would cover the massive interest payments, but the reality was far different.
The book talks about how the casino was over budget from the start, with extravagant features, like gold-plated bathroom fixtures and crystal chandeliers.
Yeah.
It all sounds very Trump, but not very fiscally responsible.
Right. And the problem with junk bonds is if the underlying venture doesn't perform as expected, those high-interest payments can quickly become unsustainable.
Right.
And that's precisely what happened with the Taj Mahal.
By 1991, the casino was drowning in debt, owing a staggering $3 billion.
Yeah.
Most businesses would have crumbled under that weight. But Trump, well, he had a different playbook.
He did. Instead of trying to salvage the situation, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now, for most businesses, this is a sign of defeat. But Trump saw it as an opportunity to, renegotiate the terms of his debt and gain leverage over his creditors.
So instead of being at the mercy of the banks, he was essentially holding them hostage?
In a way, yes. He knew that the banks had more to lose by seizing the Taj Mahal than by restructuring his debt. So he offered them a deal they couldn't refuse: forgive $1 billion of the debt.
Wow.
Or end up owning a worthless casino.
And, amazingly, they agreed. Trump walked away with 50% ownership of the Taj, essentially wiping out a significant portion of his debt and retaining control of the very asset that nearly brought him down.
Yeah, it's a bold, almost counterintuitive approach to debt. He understood that when you owe a massive amount of money, the power dynamic shifts.
The banks become more afraid of you failing than you are of them calling in the debt.
Precisely. And this wasn't a one-time thing.
Right.
The book points out that Trump has filed for corporate bankruptcy 6 times.
Wow.
Using this tactic repeatedly to restructure debt, shed unprofitable ventures, and ultimately emerge, in a stronger position.
But this reset button strategy wasn't without its victims, right?
Absolutely. While Trump might have walked away relatively unscathed, thousands of employees lost their jobs, contractors went unpaid, and investors saw their savings disappear. The human cost of his financial maneuvering was significant.
It raises important ethical questions about the true cost of doing business this way.
It does, but there's no denying that it was a key factor in his ability to amass wealth, even in the face of repeated setbacks.
Okay, so we've covered starting rich, branding brilliance, and mastering debt. Now let's talk about something that's almost synonymous with the Trump name: controversy.
Yeah.
Right.
Ah, yes. Chapter 4, Controversy, the Renewable Resource. This is where we see how Trump turned outrage, media attention, even scandal into fuel for his empire.
It's almost like he thrives on the negative attention. Like he understood that any publicity is either publicity, And the more outrageous he is, the more people talk about him.
Right. And this wasn't just like a byproduct of his personality.
Right.
It was a calculated strategy.
Yeah.
He knew that controversy attracts attention.
Right.
And attention in today's media landscape translates to power and influence.
The book cites numerous examples of this. His inflammatory comments about Mexican immigrants during his presidential campaign, for instance, generated a firestorm of controversy,
Yeah.
but also solidified his support among a certain segment of the electorate.
Right. And then there was the whole birther conspiracy where he spent years pushing the baseless claim that President Obama was not born in the United States.
It was a lie that was repeatedly debunked.
Right.
But it kept him in the headlines, boosted his profile within the Republican Party, and ultimately helped pave the way for his political ascent.
He understood the power of tapping into people's fears, anxieties, and prejudices.
Yeah.
And he was willing to say or do anything to generate that emotional reaction.
Right.
Even if it meant promoting conspiracy theories or spreading misinformation.
And let's not forget about Trump University, which was essentially a scam that preyed on people hoping to learn his real estate secrets.
Yeah, people paid tens of thousands of dollars for seminars that offered nothing more than basic advice, high-pressure sales tactics,
Right.
and empty promises.
When lawsuits started piling up, he eventually settled for $25 billion, but never admitted any wrongdoing.
And incredibly, instead of hurting him, the scandal actually helped his presidential campaign. You know?
Wow.
He spun it as an attack by the political establishment and used it to rally his supporters.
It's almost like he's Teflon coated. Scandals that would stink any other public figure just seem to slide right off him.
It's a testament to his ability to control the narrative, to turn even negative publicity to his advantage. He understood that in the age of social media, outrage often spreads faster than truth, and he expertly exploited that dynamic.
So controversy becomes a tool for him, a way to distract from negative news, dominate the media cycle, and solidify his brand.
Exactly. And that brand wasn't just about real estate or entertainment anymore. You know, it was about
Yeah.
a certain set of values, a worldview that resonated with people who felt ignored, disenfranchised, and angry at the status quo.
He gave them a voice, a platform,
Right.
and a sense of belonging, even if it was built on a foundation of grievance and resentment.
And that's a powerful thing,
Yeah.
especially in a world where people feel increasingly isolated and disconnected.
Okay, so we've seen how Trump mastered the art of controversy at home.
Yeah.
But this next chapter, Global Hustles the World as a Branding Playground, takes us on a tour of his international ventures, where things get even more interesting.
This isn't about, like, building businesses overseas
Oh, yeah.
in the traditional sense, you know?
Right.
It's about leveraging the Trump brand, selling the idea of luxury and exclusivity
Right?
to developers around the world.
Think of it like a franchise model, right? But instead of burgers or coffee, he's selling the idea of Trump.
Exactly. And developers, especially in emerging markets,
Right.
were eager to attach that luxury label to their projects, believing it would attract buyers willing to pay a premium.
The book mentions Trump Tower Istanbul, where a Turkish developer paid $5 million just for the right to put Trump's name on the building. And when the building ended up with, like, construction problems, flooding even, Trump simply distanced himself.
Yeah, that was his strategy across the board.
Wow.
Collect those hefty licensing fees up front
Right.
and minimize his risk. Developers in India, Panama, the Philippines, they all wanted a piece of the Trump brand, believing it would be a guaranteed success.
And those buyers often ended up with the short end of the stick, right? The book details the Trump Ocean Club Panama, where investors poured millions into what was promised to be Latin America's tallest building. But it was plagued by allegations of fraud, mismanagement, and shoddy construction.
The pool closed, the spa went bankrupt, the penthouse flooded.
Oh, wow.
It was a disaster for everyone involved, except, of course, Donald Trump. He walked away with a cool $75 million in licensing fees,
Wow.
while investors were left licking their wounds.
It's a pattern we see repeated throughout his global ventures. The Trump Tower Punta del Este in Uruguay faced similar issues
Right.
with lawsuits and construction defects. The Trump International Golf Club Dubai was announced with much fanfare,
Yeah.
but never actually materialized.
And yet, in each case, Trump managed to profit from the association,
Right.
often distancing himself from any responsibility when things inevitably went south.
It's a fascinating, if somewhat unsettling, glimpse into the world of global branding
Yeah.
and the power of a name to generate wealth, even when the underlying product is questionable.
It raises ethical questions about Responsibility, transparency,
Right.
and the potential for exploitation in these kinds of deals.
And these global ventures weren't just about branding. They also played a key role in his financial maneuvering,
Right.
particularly when it came to his golf courses.
Right. The book highlights how he often purchased golf courses during economic downturns,
Okay.
taking advantage of like fire sale prices.
Okay.
But the real prize was in the tax benefits. Losses from those golf courses could be used to offset taxes on other income, like his earnings from, The Apprentice.
So he was essentially using one venture to subsidize another,
Right.
minimizing his tax burden in the process.
Exactly.
And let's not forget about the political connections that were already starting to intertwine with his business dealings.
The book mentions Trump Tower Baku in Azerbaijan,
Okay.
where he partnered with an oligarch linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard.
Wow.
The project raised serious red flags about potential money laundering, but it ultimately fizzled out before completion.
And then there was Trump Soho in New York,
Yeah.
financed in part by Russian investors with alleged ties to organized crime.
Yeah, these ventures highlight how he was already blurring the lines between business and politics even before his presidential run.
It's a pattern that would become even more pronounced during his time in office.
Yeah.
Which is where we'll pick up after a quick. So we've seen how Trump built his fortune through, branding, debt, and controversy. But this next chapter, the art of the grift, turning politics into profit.
Yeah.
This takes things to a whole new level.
This is where the lines between business and politics become incredibly blurred.
Right.
And we see how he used his presidency to enrich, his own businesses and those of his allies.
The Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. became like the epicenter of this.
Right.
It was like a magnet for lobbyists, foreign dignitaries,
Right.
anyone seeking to curry favor with his administration.
It was a blatant conflict of interest
Right.
that he never even tried to hide.
And these individuals and groups were essentially funneling money into his businesses while simultaneously lobbying for policy decisions that would benefit them.
Yeah.
I mean, the book cites numerous examples of this. Saudi Arabian diplomats spending lavishly at Trump properties while seeking arms deals. Malaysia Prime Minister hosting a $10,000 a night diplomatic dinner at a Trump hotel during a U.S. visit. Republican groups treating campaign funds like a personal slush fund.
Yeah.
Pouring millions into events and stays at Trump properties.
It was a shocking disregard for ethical norms.
Right.
And a blatant abuse of power.
And it didn't stop there. He also turned his campaigns into, fundraising machines.
Right.
Exploiting his supporters' loyalty for personal gain.
The book details how his 2020 campaign used aggressive tactics,
Right.
like recurring donations.
Oh, wow.
Often tricking small-dollar donors into unknowingly signing up for weekly charges that were difficult to cancel.
Wow.
They ended up refunding over $122 million.
Wow.
Which speaks volumes about the tactics they were using.
Right.
And let's not forget the merch madness.
Right, right.
He was selling everything from Stop the Steal beer koozies to $500 digital trading cards depicting himself as a superhero.
Wow.
It was all about monetizing the outrage, turning his supporters' anger and fear into cold, hard cash.
And even after losing the election, he continued to milt his base for all it was worth with the launch of Truth Social.
Truth Social, his social media platform, was supposed to be a haven for free speech, but quickly devolved into a platform for misinformation and conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
All while generating revenue through, subscriptions and merchandise sales.
And then there were the NFTs, those digital trading cards that sold for $99 a piece.
Yeah.
Promising buyers a piece of history and a chance to win a dinner with Trump. It was a brilliant, albeit cynical, way to capitalize on his dwindling base of supporters.
So we see a clear pattern here. From his early business dealings to his time in office and beyond, Trump has consistently blurred the lines between personal gain and public service, using his position and his platform to enrich himself.
It's a stark reminder that power corrupts, and when someone has no moral compass, the consequences can be devastating. Which brings us to Chapter 7, Media Warfare Trolling as a Business Strategy, where we see how Trump weaponized media,
Right.
using it to manipulate, distract, and ultimately control the narrative.
His Twitter account was his primary weapon.
Right.
And he used it masterfully to attack opponents, spread misinformation, and create a constant state of chaos that kept him at the center of the news cycle.
Right. Remember Kofefe?
Yeah.
That late-night typo that became a global phenomenon. It was a perfect example of how he could turn even the most nonsensical situations to his advantage, distracting from negative news and sparking endless media speculation.
And it wasn't just his own tweets. He also expertly leveraged troll armies and online echo chambers to amplify his message and attack his critics, retweeting conspiracy theorists and far-right figures,
Right.
giving them mainstream legitimacy and signaling to his followers that their extreme views were acceptable.
He was a master of gaslighting,
Yeah.
sowing doubt, creating confusion, and making people question their own reality. And of course, we can't talk about Trump's media strategy without mentioning his symbiotic relationship with Fox News.
Right. They were two sides of the same coin,
Right.
feeding off each other's outrage and misinformation.
Right.
Fox News served as like his personal propaganda machine, echoing his talking points and feeding his base a constant diet of biased information. In return, his scandals and outrageous statements boosted their ratings. It was a lucrative feedback loop
Right.
that eroded trust in media and intensified political polarization.
It's a chilling example of how media can be weaponized to undermine truth and manipulate public opinion. Now in Chapter 8, Loyalty Games Cultivating Followers as Currency, we see how Trump took this manipulation to a whole new level,
Right.
transforming his supporters' loyalty into a source of both power and profit.
He created a cult of personality
Yeah.
by fostering an us versus them mentality,
Right.
framing himself as a victim of persecution by the deep state and the liberal elite,
Right.
and rewarding blind loyalty with recognition and access.
He constantly emphasized this sense of grievance, telling them they were being cheated, ignored, and disrespected by the establishment, and presented himself as, their savior,
Right.
the only one who could fight for them and make America great again.
This victimhood narrative was incredibly effective,
Yeah.
allowing him to justify any action, no matter how outrageous or unethical, as a necessary defense against his enemies.
The Stop the Steal campaign is like a prime example. He knew he had lost the election, but he continued to push this lie about widespread voter fraud,
Right.
knowing that his most devoted followers would believe him
Right.
and open their wallets.
And they did, donating millions of dollars to his election defense fund, much of which was diverted to his personal accounts and businesses.
Wow.
They stormed the Capitol, convinced they were fighting for democracy, when in reality they were pawns in his game of power.
It's a chilling reminder that blind faith can have dangerous consequences.
Right.
And it's crucial to question those who demand absolute loyalty, demonize their critics, and claim to have all the answers. Let's move on to Chapter 9, The Failure Franchise Bankruptcy as a Brand. This chapter revisits Trump's penchant for turning financial ruin into a strange sort of badge of honor.
He's filed for bankruptcy 6 times, and each time he's managed to spin it as a strategic move, a shrewd negotiation, evidence of his business acumen. He's built a brand around his ability to fail forward, to walk away from his debts and rebuild time and time again.
And it's a narrative that's resonated with a certain segment of the population.
Yeah.
Those who admired his willingness to take risks, his defiance of conventional wisdom, and his ability to bounce back from adversity. But we can't forget about the human cost of his business failures.
Right.
The thousands of employees who lost their jobs, the contractors who went unpaid, the investors who saw their savings disappear.
His bankruptcies have left a trail of devastation in their wake.
Yeah.
And while he might have emerged relatively unscathed, the impact on others was significant.
So we're left with this complex legacy, a man who built a fortune through a combination of audacity, branding, and a willingness to push ethical boundaries to the breaking point. And that brings us to the final chapter, Legacy for Sale, the Trump Playbook's final act.
This is where we see him grappling with his legacy, but not in the traditional sense of philanthropy or statesmanship. For Trump, legacy is just another opportunity to cash in.
Even his legal troubles become part of the brand.
Yeah.
The book talks about his 2024 indictment on 37 felony charges and how instead of, laying low, he turned it into a fundraising bonanza,
Right.
selling not guilty merchandise and rallying his supporters against the deep state.
He continues to exploit the outrage,
Yeah.
using Truth Social as his personal echo chamber to rail against the witch hunt and promote, his own products and ventures.
Global licensing deals are still bringing in revenue,
Right.
though from increasingly questionable partners in the less desirable locations.
Yeah.
He's making paid appearances on friendly media outlets, ranting about his persecution and selling everything from gold coins to survivalist gear.
Even his book releases, which are flopping spectacularly,
Right.
become opportunities to blame woke bookstores and rally his base. It's like he's squeezing every last drop out of the Trump name, regardless of the consequences.
So after this deep dive into Trump's wealth-building strategies, what are we left with? What's the takeaway?
I think it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths
Yeah.
about our society, you know?
Yeah.
Trump's success, however fleeting or ill-gotten, reveals our collective fascination with celebrity, our tolerance for outrage, and our susceptibility to manipulation.
He's exposed the cracks in our system, the loopholes that allow wealth to be accumulated through dubious means, the media ecosystems that profit from division and fear, and the vulnerabilities of a political system that can be exploited by those who prioritize personal gain over public service.
His playbook is a cautionary tale.
Yeah,
A reminder that success at any cost can leave a trail of destruction,
right.
both financial and societal. But it's also a challenge, a call to action, you know?
Right.
We can choose to learn from his mistakes, to demand more from our leaders, to be more discerning consumers of information, and to build a society that values integrity over spectacle, empathy over exploitation.
Trump's story is a reflection of our times, a mirror held up to our collective values. The question is, what will we see when we look in that mirror? And more importantly, what will we do about it? This deep dive has only scratched the surface, and we encourage you to explore the source material further, form your own conclusions, and, most importantly, take action. The future is not preordained. It's something we create, collectively, through our choices and our actions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.